Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Purple Insider. Matthew Coller here for Monday Morning Murph, and I have a declaration, Brian Murphy, of course, with me. This was a random one-score win. It was one of those random one-score wins that people seem to claim is all one-score wins, but they're not. There are one-score wins that are much better than other ones. This one, however, was a little bit more given to the Minnesota Vikings than taking away. Would you agree with that assessment of the Vikings win over the Arizona Cardinals?
I thought so. I thought it was hard earned. They came up with the plays they needed to defensively. And of course, Sam Darnold offensively led them on that game winning drive. So you're right. I mean, remind me, did the game in Lambeau end a one score game? Because if it did, that was an ugly one score win because clearly they had that game in hand at halftime and deep even into the third quarter. But I think one score games are kind of the industry standard around the NFL. I mean, that's what parity and the draft and a salary cap and competitive balance will do for you. It certainly guarantees outstanding entertainment, even when maybe it's two teams that are unevenly matched. If anything, I thought the Vikings finally got a challenge they needed, certainly an opposing quarterback challenge they needed in Kyler Murray that they really haven't had the last several weeks. I mean, we know Caleb Williams is on the rise, but that team, the Bears are a mess. So you got to kind of put an asterisk by him. But Mac Jones and Will Levis and, the ugly wins on the road. I was looking forward to seeing how they would match up against Murray and sort of as they get onto this stretch drive, which is going to be much more defined by quality quarterback play and tougher opponents, how they would respond. And it took a few quarters, again, on both sides of the ball. It wasn't like Arizona was marching up and down. They stalled in the red zone a couple of times, and the Vikings were able to stiffen when needed. But I think the one-score victories can earn you a little bit of credibility, and I think it pays off in the long run. One-score losses, as painful as they can be, and I believe the losses to the Rams and the Lions were also one score. So I feel like the Vikings are equipped in the fourth quarter when either the defense or Darnold and the offense need to go out and win a game. They're in a position to go out and win a game because they've had that experience doing it, no matter their opponent, no matter their opposing quarterback. It still comes down to making money plays at money moments, and the Vikings have had that in spades this year, and it's been kind of fun and entertaining to watch.
The Rams loss was by 10, but only because of the old tug on the face mask.
Yeah, it was an 8-point game. Right.
Yep. And Sam Darnold didn't have any chance to go down and potentially tie that up because of the uncalled face mask. But anyway,
thanks for cleaning that up for me.
The one-score game thing has been driving me a little crazy. I don't know if people are fans of South Park, but South Park did an episode called Simpsons Did It, where every single storyline they had a character say, the Simpsons did this already because those cartoon shows were being accused of ripping off the Simpsons. You get it. That was their way of mocking it. Simpsons did it. Simpsons did it. And I hear that voice with one-score game, like every single time. But Tom Pelissero tweeted out that 12 of the 13 games that happened before the Sunday night blowout in the snow by the Bills, so 12 of 14 this week, were one-score games. It's everywhere in the league. It happens all the time. And I don't know when we decided as a society that one-score games were random, because I looked it up. Tom Brady is like 91-43 in games separated by 7 points. I'm guessing that wasn't completely random, that he won way more than he lost. And when you look at those close games the Vikings have played, this was truly the first one where they didn't have at least 80% chance to win with 5 minutes left to go in the fourth quarter. This was the one where they did get outplayed for a very large percentage of this game on offense and on defense, and had to come up with a bunch of red zone stops and come up with several magical and fast drives by Sam Darnold. But I also think, Murph, that the coaching matters in this discussion for one-score games. Matt Eberflus was 5-19. So I don't know if you
Imagine
can say,
that.
right? Like, is this the same thing, or am I looking at the same picture? I don't think so. Between Chicago and Matt Eberflus and Kevin O'Connell and the Vikings, Justin Jefferson matters to this equation. Jonathan Grenard matters to this equation. I think that they have the personnel and the coaching to play and win in close games. But I would also say if they play like that against Arizona the rest of the way, they might win one or two of the rest of these games. They have to learn from this and be better going forward.
Yeah, and that's been an ongoing theme for them the last 4 or 5 weeks, really, since the loss in LA. I mean, the 5-game winning streak has got asterisks all over it. It's got pockmarks and nitpicks and dents and dings. I've tried to kind of steer away from getting obsessed with that, because it is easy to go down that rabbit hole of, yeah, but for this opponent, or but for this quarterback, or but for this overwhelmed head coach, or this rebuilding team, the Vikings would be 6-6. I don't go down that deeply into the rabbit hole. You play the schedule that you're given, and the Vikings, racked up some quality wins early, leveled off, and now have had to fight their way through this 5-game winning streak. And if you can't find the appreciation in that, I mean, if you're constantly chasing perfection, if you're constantly measuring yourself up against the Detroit Lions, or maybe even the Buffalo Bills or the Kansas City Chiefs, which is easy to do. Obviously, the Lions are in your division. They're in your backyard. You got another game against them. These are also flawed teams. I mean, I think people put these teams up on a pedestal and say, well, they're not as good as the Eagles, or their roster isn't as solid as Detroit. And they can't come up with 40 points the way the Chiefs or the Bills can on a dime. But I think, you're losing perspective in the sense that not every team can be 11-1 and on a stratosphere to the Super Bowl. And not every team that's 11-1 on a stratosphere to the Super Bowl always emerges in January. I mean, the Vikings are putting themselves in position to have a lot of have a tough armor going into the playoffs. It looks pretty obvious, unless they can grab and surpass Detroit, that they're destined for the number 5 seed here. It looks like they're going to have a wild card seed. Even 13 wins may not get them a home game. They're going to go on the road. They're going to have to face a middling NFC South team, it's looking like at this point, on the road. This should pay off for them, because this is going to have to be hard-earned. They're going to have to take the tough road to get there. I don't think constantly measuring yourself against the 2 or 3 other teams on paper that look much better than you and maybe win cleaner, or win by wider margins, or win more excitingly, or a little more star-driven. What are you complaining about at this point? Because I think you're seeing star play from players that may not have been as heralded. I mean, we've all talked about Darnold, but Aaron Jones was a good, solid running back at Green Bay. He's a game changer here in Minnesota, for good and for bad, and we can get into his fumbling issues in a bit too. Jonathan Grenard's had a solid career. Stephon Gilmore, who just got hurt, solid careers, Pro Bowl careers. But that feels like they're part of a greater purpose here and a greater machine, and they're being put into positions at this stage of their career to really make huge game-breaking plays. I think that's what you need to embrace. Some of the unheralded plays, some of the guys that are emerging, the Byron Murphys of the world, Ivan Pace before he got hurt. Now you got, I just feel like I feel like the fan base is so conditioned for misery and ruined expectations. They're just unwilling at this point to hitch their emotions to this team. And I could even sense through the screen yesterday that US Bank Stadium didn't feel like this was a 9-2 team coming home on a 4-game winning streak, and we haven't seen anybody in a month. Let's rock the joint. It felt, now granted, their play didn't help with that, but it just felt like there's a reluctance to buy in, and I'm not quite sure why that is, because if you're going to be measuring yourself against these elite teams, you can always find faults, but they're flawed too. And I like the way the Vikings are playing. I like the way they're They're not getting overwhelmed by the moment. I just feel like this is a team better equipped for success than the 2022 team that owned one-score victories and laid an egg in the playoffs.
And I guess maybe that's why people have not bought in, because we saw this 2 years ago. It's truly completely different. Their expected win loss is different. Their point differential is different. Their defense is wildly different. When you look at net yards per attempt, the Vikings in 2022 were just about the worst defense in the NFL. This year, they're in the top 10. And the same goes for points allowed. Where they were 29th in points allowed in 2022. And I think they're fifth right now in the NFL. They were giving up 400 yards to Mike White, not Kyler Murray, not just Kyler Murray, but to Andy Dalton, to Mac Jones went off on them on Thanksgiving night in 2022. But
Daniel Jones had the game of his life.
Twice the game of his life. That's not happening this year against this defense. I do have concerns about this defense getting worn down. They played 77 snaps in this game. They were asked to do a lot, and it was largely because the offense wasn't on the field. Andrew Jones's fumble, Andrew Jones, not the outfielder for the Braves, Aaron Jones's fumble, and Darnold getting sacked, short drives, punts, ending drives with field goals where you have 3rd and 2 and you want to throw the ball down the field because that's what you always do, and really taking until the second half to remember that Justin Jefferson needs that old pigskin in his hands and to throw some underneath passes. And Jonathan Gannon had a good plan against them, but when everybody knows you're running Jefferson down the field all the time, you need a little bit of a different plan, and it took them until the second half to get there. There's a lot about this team that says to me it might be tough to go on the road multiple times all the way to the Super Bowl. And there is statistical evidence right in front of you to say that the Detroit Lions are a significantly better team than the Vikings on a lot of different metrics. But last year in the NFC Championship, the point differential for San Francisco was plus 193. For Detroit, it was plus 66 on the season, and Detroit was a 4th down conversion away from beating them and going to the Super Bowl, because this is the world we live in. You bemoan the one-score wins, but the one-score wins might benefit you in the playoffs because it closes the gap between the best and the good teams on any given Sunday. So that's where I'm always thinking about, do you reach a bar to have a case when you go into the playoffs? Right now, they're hovering around that bar. As far as wins go, they're absolutely on pace for this, but you do have to beat some teams in better fashion as we go forward, and there will be more tests. But I really don't understand saying one-score wins, this team sucks. Huh? The whole league is playing these one-score wins. And by the way, if your coach out of, 33 one-score games since he took over, has won 24 of them, there might be something that he does better than Matt Eberflus that helps weigh the odds a little bit in your favor in some of these games. I'm not saying there's no randomness. My point is, this is not a reason to look at this team and go, who cares about them? They're a bunch of frauds. It doesn't look like that to me, even if the most recent game they actually did get outplayed.
Well, mental toughness really matters when you get into the playoffs. And if you have muscle memory of either being down or needing a 3rd down stop, a 4th down stop, a turnover on a particular defensive touchdown, if you need a game-winning drive with under 3 or 2 minutes left and limited timeouts and a long field to go, I would feel pretty confident having this defense in position to do that with Brian Flores on the call. I'd be pretty confident with Sam Darnold taking over inside his 10-yard line with 2.5 minutes left and 1 timeout and needing either 3 or 6 to tie the game and extend it or take the lead, because they have done that, because they have performed both units in high leverage situations, as the baseball parlance goes. That all matters. That all adds up later on, because then you're going to draw from a wealth of experience, resilience, an ability to shake off poor play, bad breaks, turnovers, penalties, unfortunate bounces that all occur throughout a football game or can occur at any moment. It's not what you did, it's how you respond. And the Vikings have responded. They've responded to every punch in the mouth they've generally taken, both in real time on the field or even in the schedule. I mean, you look at those back-to-back losses against Detroit and LA in a 4-day span, and those were two haymakers they absorbed, and all they've done is run off 5 straight wins. And I know there's caveats to that. I know it's Jacksonville and Mac Jones and Tennessee and Will Levis and Chicago crazily coming back, but then melting down, and then ultimately melting down to the point where they're starting over again. The Cardinals, I think there was a sense probably in the building that, again, the other shoe's going to drop today because they seem to have found a way to scheme defensively and pressure and blitz Darnold to the point where they don't know where the pressure's coming, almost like a Vikings type scenario where you don't know where the next free man is coming to take down your quarterback. But the adjustments were made. The plays were made. The two things that really do concern me more than anything, and they've been haunting this team for a while now, you brought up the fatigue on the defense. I think that's been a weekly theme that we've touched upon, and I've mentioned it over and over again. A veteran defense put under that kind of strain over the course of 17 games is going to crack from a health standpoint, from a endurance standpoint, and almost from a mental standpoint. You got to worry about how much that unit has been shouldering when the Vikings are going 3 and out or turning the ball over, which leads me to my next stat. 53 turnovers since the start of last season. No other team has had that many. And these are really unforced, ugly turnovers. Aaron Jones's yesterday, he was fortunate Brian O'Neill fell on his first one, but these are really ugly, unforced, sort of really preventable turnovers, whether it was Darnold's decision-making 3 or 4 weeks ago, Jones's penchant for fumbling lately. You can't outrun that demon for that long, and it goes hand in hand with the fatigue of your defense. If you're turning the ball over and putting the defense back on the field to defend a short field, that's high leverage, that's high stress. And again, this is an accumulation. We're now into December. The defense is going to start feeling the effects of those short drives and short-circuited drives from the first half of the season. So turnovers and keeping the chains moving, I think, are the two keys right now, really, if the Vikings are going to ride this wave of good fortune, good play, and good luck all the way to 13, 14 wins and maybe a run. Those things need to be corrected. And, limiting the turnovers kind of self-corrects the long periods of time the defense is on the field. But those are the two things that stand out to me that are really unsustainable. But we've been saying that now for weeks, and it seems to be sustainable. I don't know for how much longer.
Yeah, in Tennessee and in Chicago, I thought they did a good job of having the ball more than their opponent, and even in Jacksonville, and screwed that up in the red zone. But Chicago was the most top to bottom offensive game, and I was curious about how they would come back after that and how they would perform. And they come out of the gate with a couple of completions, they move the ball, and they get to that 3rd and 2. And these are problems that kind of crop up each week, where these 4th and 2, 3rd and 2, the short yardage at the goal line, when they got inside the 5, my first thought was, here we go again with, can they actually score inside the 5? And they've got to throw a pass to Aaron Jones because they have no confidence that they could just hand off and go get a first down. Even on the 3rd and 2 on the first drive, that the answer should be hand it off to somebody, blast up the middle. Even if you only get a yard, then QB sneak. But Kevin O'Connell always has to be kind of one step ahead and sometimes can't just do the obvious thing. And maybe that's the one critique that I have of him over 3 years, is that the obvious thing is
run
the
the
right
ball.
thing, right? A lot of times it's 3rd and 2, you're in the red zone, run the ball and get that, get the first down or get a QB sneak if you only gain a yard or whatever. Go from there. Of course, if he scores a touchdown on that pass, then I probably don't bring it up. But keeping drives sustained is something that has to consistently happen throughout the season, and I think the rest of the season. And I think that always hunting these big plays will result in ups and downs. In Chicago, they had to get a 70-yard pass to Jordan Addison, 30 30-yard pass to Hawkinson, 30-yard pass again to Addison, like these big plays. And when it's working, oh my gosh, is it ever working? But when it's not, then the other team has the ball all day. And if you do that against good teams like Arizona, they will take advantage. Their offensive coordinator is good. Like he was throwing short passes, he was running the ball, and then they just had to rely on those key stops in the red zone. That is not where you want to be. I think I would say that yesterday probably had, I might even say, more red flags than the Jaguars game. The Jaguars game, 3 picks in the red zone or inside the 25 almost never happens. 3 interception games, even for Sam Darnold in his career, almost never happens. But what they ran into yesterday is stuff that has happened throughout the season and cannot continue to pop up. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, and they were really out schemed for, a good chunk of that game yesterday, which you haven't seen much of this year. But the Arizona's coaching staff came to play and really had a good game plan for a road game. And I thought that they were really well positioned to eke, not even eke out a victory. I mean, they were winning convincingly heading into that fourth quarter. If that final drive hadn't melted down the way it had, and again, credit the Vikings for creating the chaos that led to a lot of that, but a touchdown drive, and we're not even talking about a 10th win here. Instead, it was a field goal, and then you put the ball in the hands of Darnold, and he comes through for you. But it was at a razor's edge there for a while, and I credit Arizona's coaching staff for really having a game plan that seemed to have the Vikings on their heels for 2+ quarters.
They did a really good job. And that's, I think, a team that one more year of talent building can be in a really good spot in their division. I want to move forward, though, to this game, Vikings and Falcons. Everybody circled it on the calendar the minute that the schedule came out. Kirk returning to Minnesota after throwing 4 interceptions against the Chargers and flat out losing them the football game. Their defense was fine, if not good, against the Chargers, gave every chance for Atlanta to win. He threw that game away. They're 500, and Cousins had his best month in October, and their defense is not that good this year because they didn't have money to invest in it. And I spent the morning, Murph, checking out the old draft grades where everybody gave Atlanta C- for drafting Michael Penix because they just signed Kirk Cousins. I guess those draft grades don't mean anything ever as usual, but what is your feeling on the way that Cousins is playing and where the Falcons stand with that team now as they come to Minnesota?
Well, there's a lot to unpack there. I do feel like, he had the great start or the decent start. And of course, Kirktober has been legendary both around here and even in Washington for the production and the flash that he shows early in the season. I watched some of the highlights from last night. There were a couple of balloon balls that I'm not sure why a 12-year veteran is even throwing, let alone putting himself in a position to get 4 picks like that. I was among the many who on draft night thought, I don't quite understand the philosophy here, and I don't think they did a really good job, the Falcons, of explaining their decision making then. But I think you and I talked on the phone yesterday about this. Maybe there's something they did know in his recovery. You got to remember, this is 36-year-old quarterback who blew out his Achilles on October 29th or 30th of last year. So by the time they're drafting, he's only 6 months into his recovery. He's nowhere near full strength. It was either a wise hedge, or a let's just backstop just in case 6 months from now Cousins is losing steam. I think the accumulation of 12 years of quarterback play, a major injury, I don't think there's any doubt that maybe physically he's just not there. I mean, he's clearly not very mobile. He never was anyway, but he's a pure pocket passer right now. And I think he's being probably limited because of that recovering. Maybe the Falcons and he don't want to acknowledge that. But that's a tough injury to come back for a quarterback in that short period of time to shoulder the burden of a franchise. All that said, I can't imagine they're going to bench him this week for a couple of reasons. One, they're still 6-6 in a bad division. I mean, it's up for grabs, not only a playoff spot, but a division and they could end up hosting the Vikings in a playoff game. And I still think you stay with your veteran. And then there's the obvious, which is I don't think there's no other game he's going to be more motivated to play than Sunday at US Bank Stadium, not only because he's coming back from the team that said, hey, thanks, but no thanks, we're moving on, but also he's probably he's coming off his worst performance in Atlanta and one of the worst performances of his career. If there's ever a time where he's going to rise and respond, this would be it. So from a mental standpoint, I think you've got a motivated quarterback. If he doesn't get the job done, or if the Falcons lose because of him again, I think you might see Michael Penix really soon. But I don't think you bench him now. I think that would really be devastating to him. I think it would be a really bad message to send because I still think he's your best option. Doesn't mean he's going to be your best option 3 weeks from now. But I think he's your best option this week to go back into his old haunt and take on his former team. If he can't be up or ready or responsive or resilient for this game, I think he might be done, frankly. So, and then the atmosphere we're going to have in there, it's going to be fascinating to see what the reaction is going to be with him, how Brian Flores dials up pressures for him, how he tries to evade that. I think it's going to be one of the extremes with Kirk. I mean, he's either going to have another 3-interception, awful-looking game where he's harassed and checks down and does all the Kirk things that we were all familiar with, or he's going to go off and have, again, a redemptive game of his life, and he may be shouting something in the tunnel more cliched than he shouted about you liking that in Washington. I just think it's going to be one of those two scenarios, and I'm angling for a credential to get there because I think this is the one game you want to be at in person, and I have a feeling US Bank Stadium is going to be a much different atmosphere Sunday than it was yesterday.
Yeah, I think so too. And just with Cousins and the idea of benching him, I think Michael Penix will be on the sideline getting the cannon loose if it starts out poorly for Kirk Cousins, because after his last 3 weeks, it's not just the 4 interceptions. It's weeks long now. They got killed by the Denver Broncos, and he was very bad in that game. And the Broncos have a similar defense to the Vikings that puts a lot of pressure on the quarterback. And it just feels like with both him and Aaron Rodgers, when you come off this Achilles injury at that age, it's not just the injury healing. It's also the other work that you put in to get your body ready for the season. Like, think about what Sam Darnold was doing in February versus Kirk is sitting around and he's 36 years old. And this was, we're going to go back, I'm sure, through the whole week and think about it. But this was the most important decision that Kwesi Adofo-Mensah would ever make, was, do you go with the quote known commodity, because it was unknown how we would recover from the Achilles, or do you go off and try to find somebody else and hope that it becomes a 10-2 Sam Darnold? And he chose the right path in moving on from Kirk Cousins. And as people are upset about them not winning by enough, it's what a crazy thought, considering how rare they've been in this position. The 6 years that Kirk Cousins was here, they were in this position of 10-2 one time, and they barely had a positive point differential through 10-2 at that point. So I think that it can't be overstated enough that the franchise shifts in a direction toward this team being a serious contender and potentially a serious contender for years to come, because they did not handcuff themselves to a broken quarterback who was never great to begin with. And we see it in Atlanta. And I just think this could have been the Vikings. It could have been exactly what the Vikings are: a bunch of weapons, a good offensive mind, but the quarterback just fading because his physical ability is not there anymore. Those, like you mentioned, those footballs, no velocity whatsoever when he was throwing a couple of those passes. And we talked about all offseason, you have to dig into the ground to throw the football. Hard to do when your legs aren't there, when your Achilles is repaired at age 35, 36. And it just highlighted as we go into this game after he throws 4 picks, how right of a decision it was for the Vikings to move on, no matter what happens in this game. We've seen Kirk always bounce back, and I have no doubt he'll be better than he was last week. But they're average, they're struggling, they're not a contender at all. Oh, well, maybe we can win the division. Golf clap, congratulations, good for you. He's not Desmond Ridder, but you're also not serious as an NFC contender after spending $45 million on him.
Yeah, this game Sunday is not a referendum on the decision to move on from Cousins. That's already been decided. I mean, not only Darnold's unexpected production and literally seizing the mantle, but your ability to break free of the financial constraints that Cousins and the baggage that he brings to it too. Even if you wanted to bring back Cousins one more year, he wasn't signing a one-year deal. So it was the financial shackles that you were able to get rid of and start over with McCarthy. But I kind of wrote about this today too. I think it's time for Vikings fans to not think that they have to put McCarthy and Darnold in two different silos. Like there's no way we can embrace Sam Darnold as the future if we've already got McCarthy, because we know Darnold's going to move on. We know he's going to command a long-term deal. I think it's important right now to keep that debate open and honest. It's going to all depend on his performance here, of course, the last 5 weeks, whatever Darnold does in the postseason, the economics of free agency. You know he's going to want a big payday and a long-term deal. But I don't think you should take off the table the notion that Darnold he's only a one-off solution. He's only 27 and he's playing at such a high level right now. You have to consider that going into the offseason, that maybe there's a way. If there's a way to keep both, I don't know. But there's a world in which you maybe never see J.J. McCarthy suit up for the Vikings, or there's a world in which, Darnold feels comfortable enough to stay here a little bit on a shorter term deal if he feels like it's a great fit. So many things that need to happen. I just wonder, though, if the fan base or even the front office is open to the idea that we don't have to lock ourselves into what was the obvious and convenient solution, that Darnold's a placeholder and a mentor, no matter how good he is. Let's hope we can contend, and then we're going to hand the keys to the franchise to McCarthy, because you're still betting on the unknown. And Darnold, week after week, is showing you what he can be. So it's a fascinating problem to have. I just wonder where the fan base and the front office is on that notion that, hey, what we thought in July or August may not be the case anymore, and are they comfortable enough to think outside that box?
Sam Darnold's played like a franchise quarterback this year. He's played like a top 10 quarterback. He's played like a guy you pay $50 million. In the future, I mean, I don't know if that's something they believe could keep happening. I don't see any of these receivers going anywhere, but it does constrain the other things you can do with the roster. The way I've looked at this, remember when we were in Vegas, Murph, once upon a time before the season, we were trying to come up with some sort of motto for the season. And I think what we settled on was something like, let's just see what happens. And that's where I've been with Darnold all year since they went 5-0 with the Darnold McCarthy discussion. Let's just see what happens, because I don't think we can solve this right now. I also don't want to try to solve it right now. I mean, I'm curious what other people think, but they're 10-2. They're chasing a Super Bowl with this quarterback right now. I'm not too concerned about that decision. I will have plenty of time to talk about it when we get to the end of the season and we have all of our information. So it's both the most interesting discussion point and one I don't really want to have, because I want to see what happens first. And I also don't want to stop appreciating this man. Sam Darnold has been freaking incredible. The throws he made yesterday in the second half of that game, incredible. I don't want to be the person who's like, what about McCarthy? Like the Simpsons did it, the one-score game. Why do we have to talk about this every single time the man has a good game? It's been a great season for him. So anyway, we will carry on, and another win here, and hopefully we see you on Sunday there at US Bank Stadium. But I agree with you, Murph. The crowd will be, I think, a little more amped up for the Kirk revenge game that will get a lot of attention this week. So I will talk to you following that game.
All right, sounds good.
And make sure you check out Murph's article, Purple Insider, where he talks about Darnold. Check it out.